Hello buddy, welcome back. I'm the Strategy Professor, and today we're going to be looking at the 9.3 AD Carry tier list. So be sure to check out my patch notes video if you haven't checked that out already. There's been a lot of changes to AD Carry on this patch, and be sure to check out my support tier list as well. I'm also going to do a mid-tier list for this patch, so check that out. And I do stream most nights starting around 9:30 PM Eastern Standard Time. We have coaching sessions on the channel, topical guides, individual champion playlists, just a ton of content, so check it out on YouTube, The Strategy Professor. Okay, so let's go ahead and get in here. Now, just really quickly, I'm just going to hit just the super highlights of the patch notes, but be sure to check out that video I talked about a second ago for the in-depth details. But the TLDR of this is that Critical Strike is a little bit better on some champions, but I still don't think that it's as good as people might market it to be, right? And there's a few reasons for that, and I go over the math in the video, but the TLDR of it is Infinity Edge is going to be much stronger at one item if people want to rush it, and people probably will rush it because Stormrazor got a lot worse. It's about the same at two items as the previous iteration of Infinity Edge with the true damage component to it. And then at three items, it's worse, actually, because you end up losing out on 25% crit that you would have had when you get Infinity Edge plus 2 Zeal items. So it's actually worse at three items than it was before. So Infinity Edge, a little bit positive. Essence Reaver is going to be a trap most of the time. It's really undervalued. It only has 60 AD on it. And basically what it comes down to, it's about the same gold efficiency as Infinity Edge, but the main difference is that you get 20% CDR, 20 less AD, and then the passives are different. You get a little bit of missing mana coming back at you instead of the critical strike modifier. And so I think the vast majority of the time, even on champions that in the past may have liked Essence Reaver, like Sivir, like Xayah, are still going to want Infinity Edge most of the time. You're just giving up way too much damage now at 20 AD plus the modifier in order to get the CDR and mana. It's just not going to be worth it. Spear of Sojin, mostly for top laners. If they get it at all, you know, it would be like Jax, Riven, Renekton, that type of thing. So not going to be happening in the bot lane. Stormrazor, I think, is pretty bad most of the time. They remove the crit on it. So this is going to open up the bot lane choices a lot more because so many people had to get Stormrazor, and Stormrazor just frankly wasn't that great. You just had to get it because everyone else was getting it. So champions like Xayah, champions like, Sivir, champions like Jinx, they really didn't want this item. They want scaling, like permanent crit items, not these one-shot type of items. So this did favor champions like Draven, like Jhin, so champions that had a really strong like initial burst in their trades, then this favored them, the old Stormrazor, and now this new one is effectively removed from the game, I think, in a lot of situations, and so that's going to open up builds. So there will be a bit more diversity in what's good at the AD Carry bot lane, but I think that AD Carry overall, most AD Carries who don't get Blather and King are going to be weaker on single item. So I think when a lot of champions get Infinity Edge first, that's overall weaker than Stormrazor first, but they do scale a little bit better with the Infinity Edge rather than Stormrazor, because, you know I talked up here just a second ago about how this is weaker at 3 crit items. The thing was, you never got 3 crit items before, like official crit items, because you had to get Stormrazor. So you'd usually go like Stormrazor, Rapid Fire Cannon, Infinity Edge or something in a previous build, whereas now you can actually go Infinity Edge, Static Shiv, and then Phantom Dancer, for example. So I think it's going to be a lot worse. The thing that's weird about this is it actually doesn't give you crit, but it interacts with the Zeal items, and that's the most wacky thing, is that it like buffs up the rapid, or not the rapid fire, but the charge items, right? The rapid fire, the static shiv, all that kind of stuff. The energize, that's the word I'm looking for. It buffs all of them up, but it doesn't give crit itself, and all of those items give crit, and so they want you to build Infinity Edge, but you're like, if you get this, you're not really like getting a lot of extra value out of Infinity Edge, and you end up paying a lot of gold for this passive. So it might be cute in some circumstances as like a 4th item, just to give you that extra boost. If you already have Static Shiv, Rapid Fire Cannon, maybe it gives you a bonus. Maybe you would want it on Static Shiv just so you get a little bit of extra damage, but the fact that it doesn't have crit is, I think, really going to set this item behind. There are some champions that would rather have the AD, so ability-based champions that have good scaling with AD might prefer this as a later game item, but champions that have a ton of auto attacks and are running lethal tempo and stuff like that, like Jinx, are pretty much never going to want to get this item. But, I could see a champion like maybe Draven getting this like really late in his build or something, like if he goes Bloodthirster, Infinity Edge, Static Shiv, and then wants to get this or something like that, maybe that makes sense because he has such good scaling with AD. But overall, the fact that it doesn't have crit is just really wacky. You're probably not going to see it a lot. Phantom Dancer is actually pretty good. I thought this was going to be bad, but after running the numbers on it, it's a pretty good kiting item. It gives you a little bit of protection against burst assassins, so you might see this as a third item, particularly on champions who don't want to get rapid fire cannon because it just doesn't have a lot of synergy with their build or what they're trying to do. So this will primarily be like Hurricane users because like Hurricane doesn't have any sort of energized system to it, and so you lose the benefit of having the rapid fire cannon where stuff energizes 25% faster. You're not getting any bonus on Hurricane with that. So for people who want to go Static Shiv and rapid fire cannon, you may not get Phantom Dancer, or you might get it fourth item, but you might potentially see this on third item on Hurricane users like Jinx or maybe like Twitch, who don't really get a lot of value out of rapid fire because they went Hurricane instead of Static Shiv as their second item. Then you might see it. So I think you'll see this item quite a bit. It's just where you'll see it. It's like a third or a fourth item, not including boots. It's kind of a niche item, but it's actually a little bit better than I thought it was going to be. Okay. Zeal items cost went down a lot. The biggest beneficiary here is Runin's Hurricane because the critical strike goes down, and a lot of times champions who are getting Hurricane aren't as dependent on the raw crit value as the people who are getting Static Shiv and Rapid Fire. The reason for that is champions who get Hurricane often have really powerful interactions with some other aspect of their kit. And so Hurricane is still going to have a lot of value, and the fact that you're getting it 200 gold less is a really good deal, especially because it's cost neutral. You know, 5% crit is worth 200 gold, so you're not actually losing value here. You're gaining a little bit of efficiency because it's a cheaper item, and you're getting those interactions faster. So champions like Jinx, who have insane interactions between Rocket and Hurricane, or Twitch with his Poison and Hurricane, or especially champions that don't even really get that much crit, like Varus and Hurricane, or I'm trying to think of somebody else, like maybe Xayah and Hurricane, although I think Xayah will start building crit now. But those types of champions that do the on-hit builds with Blather and King are really going to like this change a lot, and it's still going to be pretty good for other people as well. So, and Static Shiv is another big winner here because they actually gave it a bit more value. They gave it 5% more value. So it is losing the critical strike. It is going down 200 gold, but it's also getting 5% more attack speed. So I think that Static Shiv is going to be really, really good right now. I think that'll be the item to rush over Rapid Fire Cannon in a lot of cases. And a big part of this is Rapid Fire just doesn't do as much damage. It doesn't crit. It doesn't have an interaction with, a special interaction with Infinity Edge, whereas Static Shiv does. So if you pull up Static Shiv here, we just compare these items. And the price that you're paying for the passive, I went ahead and wrote those down for you on the Google Doc, which you can find in the description. I also have a link to all the champions I'm going to talk about and some little mini guides that I'm going to reference. Those will be in the Google Doc as well, if you want to look at those, and that'll all be in the description. But this is what you're paying for the passive. So you've got all of the raw stats. All of that is sort of standardized. They all have very similar attack speed and critical strike damage, with Static Shiv and Runa's Hurricane having more attack speed on them. So they're going to be a bit more valuable. But you're paying 650 gold for the Rapid Fire passive. So that means that it's a super inefficient item. If we look at it here, it's only 75% efficient. And this does give you 35% range, which is nice, but it only gives you 60 to 140 bonus magic damage, and that can't crit. Okay, so if you're someone who has a really strong first hit, or you have some other kind of on-hit interaction that you need that extra range for, so like you're a Caitlyn, or you're a Draven, or a Jhin, or someone like that who has a really powerful single shot, they might still want Rapid Fire Cannon. But if you're just someone generic, if you're just like a Jinx or a Sivir or a Tristana, or just somebody who wants to scale with crit, a Rapid Fire is not going to be as good, especially if you're a Hurricane user like Jinx or Twitch. You don't want it because a major draw of this is you get energized attacks 25% faster. So that includes Fleet Footwork, that includes Static Shiv. That also includes Storm Razor if for some reason you want to get that item. So this is a really good companion item after you already have another energized item, but I think as a second item, it's going to be rough, except on those champions where you have the strong first hit that I mentioned before, because it's just not going to give you the same level of raw power as some of the other items. Whereas Static Shiv, you can see it's 85% efficient, so it's 10% more efficient in value. This can crit, and it does interact with an Infinity Edge. So not only does it crit, but it even gets bonus crit when you have Infinity Edge, and it's AoE, so this gives you a lot of wave clear and a lot of power in team fights. Because just imagine, you know, hitting somebody with this, critically striking with an Infinity Edge. It's just going to blow up, especially if you combine this with something like Runan's Hurricane, where, like, on Jinx with her rockets, where you fire, like, one lob of this into an enemy and it crits. All of the rockets crit and the static shiv crits and bounces everywhere. I mean, you could almost one-shot the whole team. Like, it's going to be pretty disgusting. So I think that static shiv is actually going to be a lot better. This used to be a rush on some champions back in the day anyways. I think they nerfed the lightning damage to minions. I think it used to do bonus damage to minions. But nevertheless, I still think this is going to be really strong. And then the Hurricane that I just mentioned, you're only paying 350 gold for those bolts. And they're super strong because they're really reliable, right? Those can crit also. So if you have Infinity Edge, these also get bonus scaling, whereas Rapid Fire doesn't. And you're basically, if you're around other people, if you're in a team fight, this is guaranteed to do 180% of your AD, right? So it's almost like you get a crit every single hit because these bolts, you know, spread out and hit everybody. They also apply on-hit effects like Blade of the Ruined King. On Jinx, each one of these bolts turns into a rocket, which we'll talk about here in a little bit, but that's a super powerful interaction. So it has a fantastic interaction with a lot of different items out there. You're only paying 350 gold for it versus like 650 on Rapid Fire Cannon, and it's consistent. You don't have to worry about whether or not it's going to crit. You don't have to wait on it to charge. As far as the energized stuff, it's just guaranteed in a team fight. If there are people around, if there are 3 people in the fight, it's going to do at least 180% damage every single hit without having to wait on charges. So I think that makes Runan's Hurricane on any champion that can get this item that has those kind of on-hit interactions that are special. You definitely want to get Runan's Hurricane. Last night when I was playing, 2 different Jinxes did not get Runan's Hurricane first, and I just about fell out of my chair. I'm like, that's the whole reason that you play Jinx, is because of that interaction. We'll talk about that a little bit more here in a second, but make sure you're doing the right thing. Make sure you're getting Runan's Hurricane on champions like Twitch, on Jinx, because it's really overpowered on them. Okay. And then the Phantom Dancer, you know, as you can see, it's about if you're hitting people. So if you're in combat, you're going to get that extra 7% movement speed, which is really nice for kiting. And it's going to be about 85% efficient as well. So it's about the same price as Runan's Hurricane, but it's got really good defense. And I think that Freak made a good case for this item. I did originally think that the 12% damage loss was going to be a lot worse, that this wasn't an even trade, that getting the shield was not as good as getting the 12% damage reduction that Phantom Dancer used to have, because that reduction interacted so well with lifesteal over time. So if you have a bunch of lifesteal, or your support's healing you up or shielding you or whatever, then the 12% was going to be better in a really long fight. But this is way better in a shorter fight, especially if you can't hit the target before they hit you. So if you get engaged on by a Syndra or a Lysandra, or Annie jumps out of a bush or something, this is still going to protect you for maximum value. So if you have 200 health, or 2,000 health rather, Annie jumps out of a bush, instantly does 1,000 damage to you. Then the old Phantom Dancer, by the time you auto-attack her, it's not going to have as much value because you're already super injured, right? Versus with this, it's always going to give you that full value whenever you fall down, as long as it's off cooldown. But it's a lot better against mages and people that are going to burst you out potentially before you can even hit them. Those situations where you might get, someone might flash on you and you get stun locked, and you know, this might actually be the saving grace to allow you to flash out of the situation. So I think that it is really good for that, and it's really good against multiple targets. So, you know, if the AD carry and the support are trying to beat you down, this can block damage from both of them rather than just one of them with Phantom Dancer. So I think overall it's a better, well-rounded item for stopping burst. So, you know, for champions that want to have extended trades, that have a lot of lifesteal, so like some builds on Tryndamere maybe, or Yasuo if he goes Bloodline, and things like that. There are some corner cases where it's going to be worse, but I think it's actually a lot better than people were predicting, including me, until I watched Freak's patch notes video. He really sold me on it. I don't think it's an item that you would rush right away, but I think it's a great companion item, particularly for Hurricane, because Hurricane is not going to have that interaction with Rapid Fire Cannon. So I think it could be pretty good. You might even see static Shiv users, people that get static, might end up getting Phantom Dancer, or maybe like Draven might end up getting Phantom Dancer as like a third item or so. People that are going like another big ticket item plus Infinity Edge. So some champions might go like Xayah. You might see her go something like Infinity Edge, Essence Reaver, and then Phantom Dancer if she's not interested in the energized stuff, if she just wants more AD. Because Xayah wants a lot of crit specifically, but then she also wants a lot of AD because her abilities scale off of AD, and most of her damage comes from her abilities, from her feathers and the feather recall. And the feather recall, her E, scales off really heavily both off of AD and off of crit. And so having something like Essence Reaver, not as a rush, I don't think, but somewhere down the line as potentially a second or a third item might be really good. And that would be where Phantom Dancer could come in, because you're not going to have the Energized synergy, because you've opted into having a bigger ticket AD item instead of a crit item. So I think the crit itemization is a lot more versatile, you know, and situational than it used to be. I think that the main cause of that is the removal of the Stormrazor guaranteed crit that opens up the field for a lot more AD carries. I do think that you're still going to see a lot of the same AD carries, especially at really high elos. You're still going to see the Lucians, the Ezreals, the Kaisas be very strong. But I think that as far as like the bottom, or like not the top like 3 or 4 champions, it's going to condense a little bit, and we're going to have a lot more equality among different champions. So ultimately, I think it's really good for the game. If they do a balance check on champions like Lucian and Ezreal in the next patch, then I think we could have, for the first time, a much more level playing field for crit AD carries, because not everyone's the same now. You know, there are all sorts of different crit builds you can get and not be troll. And so I think that's really healthy for the game, so that not everyone is pigeonholed into one specific crit build. Not everyone has to get Infinity Edge, Static Shiv, Rapid Fire Cannon. There are other options. And then I think that champions that get Blade of the Ruined King and like Gensu's Rage Blade can still be viable, potentially, like Kog'Maw. I don't think they're as good as the crit champs, but I think that there is more room for negotiation than there used to be. Okay, let's go ahead and get in here to the tier list. So I've gone back to kind of this older format. I had been toying around with doing a separate tier list for like silver and below, and then gold and platinum, and then high level play. But people ask me, you know, what about this champion? What about that champion? So I just want to cover as many champions as possible, even if I only get to talk about them for a minute or two, just so you can kind of get a sense for how I think they fit into the meta. So that's why I've decided to do this. And it's always going to be 5 in tier 1, 5 in tier 2, 5 in tier 3. Even if I think something like Lucian is probably in a tier of his own, I still do it that way, just to talk about, just to have it nice and organized and consistent from patch to patch. So you always know tier 1 is top 5. You always know tier 2 is top 5. Because some of these tier lists that I see, they'll be like, okay, this is tier, they'll have like 2 champions in tier 1, and then tier 2 is like 15 champions. And it's like, well, you know, how am I supposed to figure out what's good based on that? So anyways, without further ado, let's go ahead and get in here. All right, Lucian, not a ton to talk about here. I'm going to try to do this faster. I actually have to do this faster because I have to head off to campus here in a little bit. I have a bunch of conferences with students today to talk about their first research paper, so I can't be taking like an hour and a half on this. We got to crank through this because I want to give you guys the content, but I also can't be late. So Lucian's still overpowered. He needs to be nerfed. I think they're going to nerf him in the next patch or two. He's been like really oppressive in pro play ever since Worlds, especially in the preseason. And you might be wondering what makes him so oppressive. It's his interaction with different specific items and specific runes. He's like so strong because of his double shot. So basically, whenever he does an ability, he shoots twice, and it gives you like a little mini crit. The second shot will do somewhere around, 55% physical damage. And so this allows him to abuse press the attack, because now he can just like press Q on somebody and then auto attack, and he triggers press the attack almost instantly, which gives him 12% extra damage. It also gives the rest of his team 12% extra damage against that champion. A lot of people forget that, but that's really good against tanks because it allows your entire team to try to burst down that Scion a lot faster. And press the attack also interacts with Blade of the Ruined King, and so does Light Slinger. So each one of these double shots applies Blade of the Ruined King and other on-hit effects, so he effectively does double damage on Blade of the Ruined King most of the time, which is super powerful. They both trigger Lifesteal, which is super strong, and then the Blade of the Ruined King trigger itself that does the 3% of current health actually interacts with the press the attack to do 12% more damage than it would normally do. So that right there is just super strong. Press the attack, Blade of the Ruined King, and then the final cherry on top there is Black Cleaver, because each one of his shots is also going to apply Black Cleaver. Black Cleaver is going to lower the armor. That means that with press the attack, you're doing even more damage, because now you have 2 debuffs. You've got the 30% from Cleaver, you've got the 12% from press the attack, so it makes him really good against tanks, makes him really good against squishies. it makes him really good with Blatherin King, because when it has lowered armor off of the Black Cleaver, then it's doing higher damage. The Blatherin King is. It also gives him a lot of health, so it makes him very survivable against assassins, because he gets all of that Cleaver health. Blatherin King gives him a lot of lifesteal and gives him extra mobility. And because these shots are usually pretty fast, because he fires them in fairly fast succession, then he can actually afford to get Ninja Tabby as well. So he can still get Berserker's Greaves and put out a lot of damage. But because he's primarily ability-based, you know, he's doing damage with Light Slinger and his piercing light and sort of, you know, dashing around the battlefield, then he can afford to get Ninja Tabby. So it just makes him a lot more durable compared to things that are usually good against AD champions. And he does a lot of ability damage early on. So this is, 85 base damage in addition to 60% of your bonus attack damage, and triggers a double attack. So it's just like an astronomical amount of damage in the early game. Scales later off of those items, gets to cheat the curve a little bit, because Blatherin King is cheaper than Infinity Edge. Black Cleaver is cheaper than Infinity Edge, and a lot of these other items. So he just hits the ground running a bit faster. His ultimate also triggers Black Cleaver. So you can just like press ultimate if it's not safe for you to walk up to a fight. You can just press that and just kind of channel it on the enemy team. It's going to cleaver everybody. So once again, it's not just him who benefits from Black Cleaver, right? It's the entire team benefits, because it shreds the armor for everybody, right? So press the attack benefits everyone on your team. Black Cleaver benefits everyone on your team. And there's a lot of AD champions going around out there. So he just has so much utility. He's got all of this shred for the team. He's got a lot of mobility. He's got survivability. He has burst damage in the early game. Great scaling in the late game. Each one of these things can crit as well. Each one of those shots can crit. So if he does get an Infinity Edge, which he could as like a third item, then he's going to be doing even more damage based on that. He could also go Phantom Dancer as third item and just become virtually unkillable and still do a ton of damage. So he just has a lot of flexibility depending on if you're losing, if you're winning, what do you need to do. You know, he can team fight well. He can assassinate people if he's really far ahead. He can skirmish. He can dodge stuff. He's just super overpowered. He does everything. I mean, the only thing he doesn't do is have longer range. He has 500 range. So against some kinds of siege comps, it can be difficult to work with on him. He does have decent wave clear. They did nerf his wave clear as well on his ult, but it still does a pretty good job of clearing waves, a lot better than most other AD carries not named Sivir. So it's pretty good. Even just the Q on a wave clears it pretty quickly, because it doesn't fall off in damage. You know, there are a lot of abilities where, you know, and this is becoming a trend more and more and more, is the abilities will do less damage to subsequent targets hit. That's not the case with Piercing Light. It does full damage to the entire minion wave. So he pushes really early. It's really cheap, Piercing Light. So he's just super overpowered. Very strong. Going to have a similar build. It's going to be Blatherin King, Black Cleaver still. And then it's kind of up to you what you want to do as the third item. You know, like I said, you could also go Ninja Tabby. I think that just straight going Infinity Edge if you're ahead is great. It gives you a ton of AD that scales with all of your abilities. You know, and those crits are going to hit like a truck, because you're going to have all of this armor shredded. Or you could just go Phantom Dancer if you want something that's going to have a bit more utility to it, but still give you attack speed, move speed, critical strike, all that stuff. So I think these two would likely be the next couple that you would want. It's just the order that you get them is kind of up in the air. It's up to you. And then just press the attack. Overheal just got buffed like really hard a couple of patches ago. Do I still have the runes up here? I don't think I still have the runes, but they buffed this up like crazy so that it's a lot easier for an AD carry to charge it by themselves without having to worry about the support to charge them. So because he gets a lifesteal item early, and you'll find this as a trend on a lot of AD carries, if they can get any kind of lifesteal, then Blatherin King's going to be stronger. You could even go, what is it, like Lifeline, or Bloodline, to get the extra lifesteal if you want to instead of Alacrity, because he doesn't care as much about attack speed, although it is nice, but just because he's primarily ability-based and double shot-based instead of just sitting there and like spamming a bunch of auto attacks, then Alacrity doesn't have as much value as it does on other people, but it's still pretty good. So it's up to you. I think Overheal's great. You can throw in Bloodline if you want, and yeah, it's going to allow him to get some pretty big shields. Strong champion, overpowered. Definitely learn how to play him if you want to gain a lot of elo on this patch. Although, beware, like I said, he's probably going to get nerfed out within the next couple of patches. Okay, Jinx is going to be the rising star. That's probably going to draw a lot of attention. I don't know if a lot of tier lists are mentioning her or not, but because I haven't looked at other tier lists yet. But she is going to be pretty strong. Let me buff her up just a little bit here, because I think that some stuff has changed about her over time. The safety and reliability are still a question here. But let me talk about some of these interactions with Jinx. So, you know how I mentioned that Hurricane users are going to be the best? Well, she's one of the best Hurricane users, and because she also benefits from Infinity Edge very, very heavily. So both of those items are extremely strong on her versus some Hurricane users, the people that have gotten Hurricane in the past, don't get Infinity Edge. So if you think about like Kog'Maw get Hurricane, or Varus, or Xayah, like they historically at least have not liked Infinity Edge as much. I do think that Xayah will start probably getting Infinity Edge, mostly to get her Q evolve early, but she's someone who actually benefits heavily from the crit and the on-hit effects of Hurricane versus other people that get Hurricane. A lot of them just do it for the on-hit effects, and the crit is just like a nice bonus. So Jinx is one of the highest scaling AD carries in the game, and a lot of that is because she gets a ton of crazy modifiers. Like this is up to 130% extra attack speed, great for taking Barons, great for taking towers. And then these rockets, the fishbone rockets, are what really does a lot of damage, right? So she gets 10% extra AD bonus physical damage on the rockets, and AoE, it hits everybody, and it gains extra range. So she can get up to 700 range on her rockets, which is massive. That's very, very far. And how this works, and this might seem kind of weird, but, and the bonus damage from fishbones can critically strike. So that 10% bonus damage can crit. A lot of champions, when they get modifiers on their abilities like this, the modifier can't crit. So like Vayne, when she tumbles, the extra tumble damage can't crit. Draven, his axe, that bonus damage that comes off of the axe cannot crit. They can lifesteal, but they can't crit. Jinx specifically can crit off of that. So that makes her a lot stronger in terms of that. And then when we look at how she interacts with Runan's Hurricane, each bolt off of Runan's turns into a rocket that also does AoE damage, which seems crazy, but that's actually how the interaction works. Okay, so whenever you fire this, you're going to fire little mini rockets that also do 40% AD. Those can crit. Those do benefit from the 10% extra AD off of Fishbones. And because they all splash, because they're all AoE, potentially they can hit the same target. Okay, so if their AD carry, if you have Runan's Hurricane and their AD carry is standing in the middle of a minion wave, and you attack that AD carry, and there are two minions sitting right next to that person, each one of those rockets can splash and hit the same person. So traditionally, Runan's Hurricane is great for AoE damage, right? You know, those bolts hit multiple people. You're getting, you know, the 40% extra AD on each one of them. You can get the 40% extra AD all on the same person from each bolt if people are clumped up enough for Fishbones. So even if the enemy AD carry is standing in a minion wave and you auto-attack them and those Fishbones splash onto them, you're getting 180% damage because you're getting the normal damage, and then you're getting the 40% off of both of the bolts. All of that can crit, and you're getting the 10% extra damage off of each one of those, right? So it's not only 180, it's almost 200% because you're getting an extra 18% damage there. So you're getting 200% damage, so it's virtually a guaranteed crit. And if that crits, then you're doing 400% damage. So if you would hit that person for 200, which is a really modest, like, simple number, and that doesn't include, if you have Infinity Edge, you get an extra 25%, right? So, you know, if you would hit them for 200, you hit them for 1,000 damage off of that, right? So if you have Infinity Edge plus Hurricane, they're standing in a minion wave, and they get critted by that, which there's a 50% chance that's going to happen, and you have 200 AD, which with just Infinity Edge is stretching a little bit, but just, you know, work with me on the numbers here, just for clean numbers, that can potentially do 1,000 damage in one shot. Because, you know, like I said, it's 200% damage because of how Fishbone splashes. If that crits, that goes from 200% to 400%, and then you're going to get the extra 25% off of Infinity Edge modifier. So 200 times 4 for 400% total damage, right? That's 800, and then the extra 25% off of Infinity Edge is 1,000. So yeah, they're going to have armor. It's going to get mitigated a little bit, but you can see how that's just like, you know, just like eye-popping, insane damage, right? Because of how that works. Now, yeah, it's not always going to line up like that, but it can. And what's even scarier is in a team fight, that can happen to all three of those people, right? So in a team fight with Jinx, if three people are clumped up on top of each other, each one of those rockets is going to hit each one of those people. So you're going to get 9 total hits. Each rocket hits 3 people in that team fight. So you could do 1,000 damage off of your first shot, you know, in that scenario. If you have 200 AD with just Hurricane and Infinity Edge, you could do 1,000 damage to everybody that gets hit by that. So that's what's so ridiculously just strong about Jinx and her interaction with Runaan's Hurricane, especially with Infinity Edge, because it triggers Fishbones, because it can crit, and that splash applies to the bolts. Okay, so that's what a lot of people don't get about Jinx, is that the bolts splash and they crit, and they can be modified, you know, by Infinity Edge. So that's why when Infinity Edge comes back and it has that crit and you can rush it as a first item, it's not a troll item, and you can get Hurricane with it, which just became a lot cheaper, that's what makes Jinx kind of go through the roof in terms of power level. So she's going to be extremely powerful on 2 items. And I think probably you should get BF Sword into Hurricane into Infinity Edge after that. I mean, you can go just raw Infinity Edge if you want for the power, but I think that the interaction between Hurricane and Fishbones is so good, it even wave clears. I mean, think about that for wave clear too. Not only are you attacking multiple targets with Fishbones, but now each one of those Hurricane bolts is also going to splash to multiple targets. So you're just going to insta-clear the wave a lot of times. It's like a Sivir that costs like, you know, 1/10 of her mana to activate. It's only 20 mana per attack, instead of like a Sivir Boomerang costing like 100 mana. You know, so she's going to have wave clear like Sivir, a lot earlier, a lot cheaper, and she's just going to completely take over team fight. She shreds towers, shreds Baron, and just scales like a maniac. She also does quite a bit of damage off of just her zap. They've buffed this several times, but if you actually pop somebody with the zap in the laning phase, it does a lot. It's 160% of your total AD, not even bonus AD. Right, so that includes your base AD. So even early on in the game, if you have like 80 AD, and even if you only have 1 point in zap, you know, that's still going to be doing somewhere around like 140 damage off of just hitting them with a zap for 50 mana. So, and it's on a fairly short cooldown. So she's got decent sort of poke and trading in lane. It has really long range too. So decent poke and trading, really good wave clear, really good scaling early on. She has really good follow-up if you have a hard CC champ. So if you have a Leona, you can drop the Flame Chompers on them. It does a decent little chunk of early damage. It CCs them for a good chunk of time. You know, for the 1.5 seconds or whatever. And so that's good. So she's got the follow-up damage. She's got kind of the burst. She's got the poke, so she can work well with Leona. She can work well with Sona, Janna, people that are going to scale up. Give her Ardent Sensor for even more interactions. Don't forget, each one of those Hurricane bolts also procs on hit effects like the Ardent Sensor stuff, so that's really strong interaction. And she's got a fairly short cooldown ult. I mean, it's only 90 seconds. Like, you just don't even see this anymore on most champions in the game. But a 90-second ult that will just blow people up. It does a lot of damage. If like anyone's below 50% health and this hits them, they're probably dead. So does a ton of damage. So yeah, just insane scaling, good poke in lane, good wave clear, good follow up if you have some CC, good sort of execute. She's just got it all except for mobility. Okay, so you have to make sure that you aren't getting hit by everything under the sun. You have to be able to dodge stuff, and she does not have any like really obvious speed ups to do that. You do have some zone control with your chompers, so you can zone some people out a little bit, but if you're constantly getting hit by thresh hooks, or you're constantly, you know, just getting hit by any kind of CC out there, it's going to be a problem. Okay, so that's still one of her major weaknesses, is that you know, she is vulnerable in that way, so you have to be very careful with how you're positioning. And she is kind of reliant on her support or her jungler or somebody to peel for her in fights. So keep that in mind. Now, she does have the long range. She does have 700 range. So, you know, you can stay really far back. And she does get a lot of extra movement speed if she does kill somebody. So if you do get a kill in a fight, then a lot of times you can dodge stuff. But just be very careful with how you're positioning her. But yeah, I think that she's going to be super strong right now. And you just want to go lethal tempo. Now, you can do Triumph plus Alacrity. I've seen different people doing different things, but Bloodline will give you some lifesteal because you don't have any lifesteal in your crit, but each one of those rockets and the explosion off of Fishbones, all of that can trigger lifesteal. And so she has the potential to get a ton of lifesteal whenever you auto-attack a minion wave. And I'm pretty sure that that is not, like, lowered by AoE. Lifesteal doesn't get lowered by AoE like Spell Vamp does. So if you have an ability like Runaan's Hurricane or like those Fishbones that does AoE lifesteal, you get the full benefit out of that. So it's possible as a later item after you go something like Infinity Edge Hurricane, you could go something like Bloodthirster or Death's Dance if you want to. Now, Death Stance is not lifesteal. That will get reduced for AoE, but I think with Bloodthirster, you would get the full 20% on Fishbone Hurricane Rockets on a minion wave. Not 100% about that. I'm like 90%, but I think that's how it works. I think most of the time you're going to want more crit, though, so you're probably going to want Infinity Edge, Hurricane, Phantom Dancer would be my guess, or Static Shiv. Static Shiv with that interaction, you know what we just talked about, the 1,000 damage on the first hit, you know, if it crits with Fishbones in a team fight, just imagine if that Static Shiv also crits and hits everybody in that team fight. You know, you're going to be getting up to like 1,300, 1,400 damage with the Infinity Edge scaling and the crit on that static. So that's getting close to like almost one-shot territory if you're hitting multiple squishies in a team fight off of 3 items. So I think Static Shiv is something that can be very, very good on her. I don't recommend Rapid Fire Cannon because you're not going to get both static and rapid fire. I've seen some people get rapid fire, and it just doesn't make a lot of sense because that's not going to give you the extra interactions with your rockets, which are ridiculous. I just talked about that a lot with Fishbones, right? So you want the Fishbones, you want the Hurricane. If you have Hurricane, your next item probably shouldn't be rapid fire because it's not going to give you any extra benefit. Whereas Static Shiv is going to kind of double down on your AoE potential, right? On your wave clear, on your AoE team fighting, and it just has better stats. You're only paying 350 gold for the static versus the 650 for rapid fire. So I would probably go Berserker, Hurricane, Infinity Edge, Static Shiv, and then Lethal Tempo. And then if you want the lifesteal, you can go Overheal. Bloodline can be very OP once you get those AoE rockets going on the healing. So that's what I've seen a lot of people doing. But if you're not sure about that, you can go the classic like Triumph plus Alacrity. Attack speed is super strong on her because, you know, the more rockets you get off, like the more insane damage that you're doing. But Lethal Tempo is already going to give you a ton, and because you're probably going to go double Zeal item, you're probably going to have a lot of attack speed anyway. So it's up to you. And she just naturally gets a ton of attack speed off of her passive, and if she switches over to her minigun, then she gets a lot of attack speed also. So it's up to you, but I'm thinking the Overheal Bloodline. If you have a healing support, if you have a Sona or a Soraka, I would definitely go Overheal. So that's going to get a lot of extra value, but this is what I would run in general. Okay, we have to speed it up, go a bit faster here. 45 minutes is like absolute latest I can run it here. Probably. I can maybe do 50, but we'll try to get done in 45. Okay, Draven's still super strong. He lost his Stormrazor interaction now, but he didn't rush that item anyways. He rushed Bloodthirster, and if you ever wondered, well, why does he rush Bloodthirster? Why doesn't any other AD carry rush a lifesteal item, but Draven does? Well, rush Bloodthirster specifically. There are some that rush Blazer and King, like Vayne, obviously, but nobody else rushes Bloodthirster, so why Draven? The reason for that is that his Q does apply lifesteal, so the Q can't crit, but the bonus damage off of his Q applies lifesteal. So he scales really, really hard with flat AD, because once this is maxed out, he basically crits every single axe, because each axe is going to do 105% bonus AD damage. So it's like you're doing 100% extra damage, and you have this flat 55 damage. So he really, really craves just flat AD. Attack speed is okay, but raw AD, that's exactly what he wants, okay? So that's why he goes Bloodthirster, because he gets insane value early on out of the lifesteal because of the spinning axes, and he wants the flat AD off of Bloodthirster for later on. And because he gets so much lifesteal off of that too, then it helps him charge up his Bloodthirster charges and helps him charge up his Overheal. So he can get a shield. When he goes Bloodthirster first item, this dude's going to be rocking in with a shield of like 300 or 400 early. It's going to be like, you know, 20% of his overall health. You're just going to see like this huge white bar on Draven. And so it makes him super hard to burst down. And if you don't burst him down, he's definitely bursting you down. The fight's not going to last very long either way. So that's what makes him so strong with Bloodthirster. And because he likes the raw AD a ton, then he can actually go Infinity Edge right after Bloodthirster. So I just said that the bonus damage can't crit. Well, he still does a lot of damage, and Conqueror is what he's going to get. So the crit is going to get a lot of extra value because it's going to be doing more true damage. So it's like you're doing even more of a crit because of Conqueror on him. So I still think that Infinity Edge, or not, don't still think, I think that's what the new build will be, is Bloodthirster plus Infinity Edge. And then he might actually want to go Rapid Fire, just because his first hit is so powerful, because of the spinning axe interaction, and because he's going to have so much raw AD, that, you know, if he crits somebody, he's going to have a 50% chance to crit. If he crits with all this bonus AD and having 2 heavy AD items, you know, off of Bloodthirster, off of Infinity Edge, off of his spinning axe, he's going to, like, crit somebody for almost one-shotting squishies at that point. So that's why rapid fire on him is very strong. It's because that first hit is just like hits you like a truck. And so I think I would go the double AD items, though. I would go Bloodthirster and Infinity Edge. Some people might go Bloodthirster or rapid fire. Definitely possible, but I would greed out and go for the all-in, go for the, you know, the 2-hit combo. Yeah, he's super strong. I mean, people know this about Draven. He's a very good bully in the laning phase. He couples very well with any sort of aggressive support, even a passive support. It doesn't matter. He's one of the best do-it-yourself hard carry 1v9 AD carries out there because he can completely dominate the lane by himself if you know what you're doing. And when you start getting those kills, you get a ton of gold. And he scales so well with gold because he gets so much benefit out of bonus AD and out of lifesteal. So those first two items, Bloodthirster and Infinity Edge, are both just like into the stratosphere power spikes for him. So he just can completely take over the game by himself, gets a ton of bonus gold. People think he's just an early game champion too. He's not. This actually lasts the entire game, 100% scaling on his AD, and he's actually not as vulnerable. Like, people think he's super vulnerable too, like he can't get away. He's less vulnerable than Jinx. He's less vulnerable than a lot of AD carries out there, right? He's less vulnerable than Twitch. He's less vulnerable than Kog'Maw, and the reason for this is he does get extra movement speed off his Blood Rush, so he can dodge stuff. I mean, 40% movement speed's legit. Like, you can dodge things with that. And then his stand aside actually allows him to stop a lot of engages, right? If Zach's trying to fly over a wall, he can knock him aside with stand aside. Jarvan's trying to engage, he can knock Jarvan aside, not his ult, but his flag and drag, he can knock aside. He can knock aside Alistar, Leona. If Thresh is trying to come in, if you time it right, you can knock Thresh aside when he's going in on you. Or your partner, you know, if Thresh is trying to hook your Sona and they're going in on the Sona, you can actually stand aside and knock the Thresh out of the air with that too. So you can save your allies as well with this if you get really, really good with stand aside, which is something that separates okay Dravens from, you know, not so, or like great Dravens from okay Dravens is what I mean to say. And of course, he has a pretty low cooldown ult, which has great execute potential as well, kind of like Jinx. So I think Draven's fantastic. He's going to be a lot stronger in the early game. It's totally possible that Draven should be the number 2 slot or even the number 1 slot. If you're really good on Draven, he is the best hard carry, you know, Smurf champion out there. He's very, very good, but he's hard to play. So that's why I have him down a little bit lower, because I think Jinx is a lot easier to play because you don't have to catch those axes. Both of them, you know, you got to be careful with your positioning. But I think Jinx is a little bit easier to play than Draven is. But if you get proficient on Draven, then he can be very strong. So you just want to go Conquer, Overheal, Alacrity, Coup de Grace, Absolute Focus, Gathering Storm. And then I just think Bloodthirster, Infinity Edge, Rapid Fire Cannon is where you want to be. Okay. And once again, that shield protects him, kind of like Lucian, against assassins quite a bit. So not only does he lifesteal an insane amount, but he also gets that shield. So you have to cut through all of that. Remember, the shield scales with armor. I talked about that in my plus healing and shielding video. So you're not going to have a lot of armor, but you're going to have a good chunk, right? So if you have a 300 shield with Draven and you have 50 armor, which is kind of a low number, right? But you can get to 50 pretty easily just with runes and base armor. Then they're actually going to have to do 300 damage to cut through that shield instead of just 200. Right, I don't know if I said a 200 or 300 shield, but you're going to have to do 50% more damage to cut through the shield because he's got that 50 armor. So shield's very, very good, and especially if you have, you know, a healer support with overheal, you know, you're going to have massive shields a lot. It's going to be very hard to kill you. Okay, Cassiopeia is the next one that I want to talk about. They did just nerf her on this patch. Her Q does less damage, her W does less damage, but she still has a lot of harassment early. She has a lot of wave clear. She scales really hard off of one item, off of Luden's Echo. So I still think that she's going to be a strong champion bot lane. She does have some protection with her ultimate. So she is going to be very good. She doesn't have as much synergy with things like Sona and Soraka because, you know, Ardent Sensors are going to have no value on her. But you know, if you have a champion like a Leona, like a Thresh, like a Xayah, Brand, something like that, then Cassiopeia is going to be very good with them. She can still work with Sona, particularly because Sona can get something like Athene's and Redemption. She doesn't even have to get Ardent. And a lot of enchanters will have some kind of option like that, but she's still going to be really good just because she comes online a lot faster. She has a lot of damage off of her basic abilities. So that's another thing that you notice here between Draven and Lucian. They do a lot of damage with like no items early on, because of Lucian's Q and his double shot, Draven's axes. then that's a common trend among these top champions is they're very good on 0 items early. They can bully people out hard, and then they also scale later on. Jinx is a bit of an exception. She doesn't do a ton of damage early, but she does a little bit extra, more so than something like a Vayne or a Sivir, because her zap is going to do really good damage. And she has nice follow-up with her chompers if someone gets engaged on. So she can do decent damage, but it's not as high as Draven or Lucian. Cassiopeia, however, does do very, very strong damage, even early on in the game. If you land your Q and then spam E on people, it does a lot. So I still think that Cassio is going to be one of the best options bottom if you're proficient on her. And it's a really nice AP option if the rest of your team has a bunch of AD. So if you have Yasuo, you know, you got Tryndamere top lane, Yasuo mid lane, and then Camille in the jungle. You need some AP. Cassiopeia is still going to be a good choice. Okay, Twitch. Twitch does get a lot better here. He's a great Hurricane abuser as well, kind of like Jinx. I think he'll probably switch back over to Infinity Edge, just going Hurricane, Infinity Edge. Then I'd probably say either Phantom Dancer or Static Shiv. Static is nice because it's going to, you know, play into his team fight capabilities a bit more. Don't do Rapid Fire Cannon on him. It's trash. Just like anyone that gets Hurricane, probably not going to want Rapid Fire. You'll still see people messing around with Blade of the Ruined King. You know, if you are, if you're really behind in the early game or it's a tough lane, which it is a lot of times for Twitch, then getting that early Vamp Scepter can be very nice, and building into Blade is good. Blade does have an interaction with Hurricane. Blade does interact with his ultimate. It does apply on-hit effects. So you are going to be lifestealing a lot, but it's a lot less damage than going Hurricane plus Infinity Edge. So I still think that's a better build because you want to evaporate people before they retaliate. So Twitch is usually a sitting duck after he becomes invisible. So you want to kill people before they know what's going on, right? It's just like, oh my God, you hear like, hi, or whatever when he shows up, and he's like, ah, you know, yelling, and then people are like, what the hell, where's Twitch? And then, you know, if they find you, if you don't kill them fast enough, then they can engage and lock you down and kill you, right? So you need to be able to blow up that Jinx before Leona realizes what's going on. So you need to kill her in like 3 hits, right? And so Infinity Edge allows you to do that much faster. Remember that Twitch's ultimate can also crit, so it does apply on hit, but it can also crit, I believe, on the ult. Yes, it can critical strike each individual target. So it gives him a lot of AD, it gives him range, and it allows him to crit people. So it does apply Blade of the Ruined King to everybody, but it also can crit everybody. So it does a ton of damage. Hurricane, those bolts can also crit, so you're not losing any value on Hurricane by not having Blade of the Ruined King. It is less like, I don't know, guaranteed damage because it's based on critical strike, but because you're going to get Hurricane anyways, plus Infinity Edge, then like it's a 50% chance to crit. And when you're throwing out all of those bolts and you're throwing out all of these spray and pray hitting people, like you're going to be getting a lot of crits. Okay, so it's going to be very strong. So, and he usually shouldn't be getting close enough to try to like kite people with the Blade of the Ruined King. So he doesn't get a ton of value off of the movement speed modifier on that. Although he might, you know, in some tough situations. But I'm just a big fan of Twitch opening up and deleting the whole team, like, instantly before they figure out what's going on, rather than, like, trying to sustain through it. Because you don't need the sustain, right? You're not going to be sitting there trading auto attacks with people a lot, like a Draven, right? You're not going to be sitting there getting in their face, just trying to bust them up, going for these 1v1s. You're going to sneak up and assassinate people, assassinate entire teams in team fights, right? That's the goal of Twitch. And so lifesteal has always been kind of like, okay on Twitch. It gets him through the lane. It's good, but because of his pattern and how he wants to fight, it's not that great because you're just overhealing, right? When you're opening up at 850 range with his ult and hitting 3 people with your ultimate, you're not gaining any value off that lifesteal because you're already going to be at full health. And if they engage on you and lock you down, you're dead, right? And so the lifesteal is not going to have a lot of value there either, whereas Draven can kind of brawl a little bit. He can scrap. He's going to get more value out of that lifesteal, so that's why I am a big advocate, you know, once again, of just going something like BF Sword into Hurricane, into Infinity Edge, and then into either Phantom Dancer or Static Shiv, depending on how often they're getting on top of you. So either way, Twitch is versatile. He can get any of those builds. I think they're all pretty good. You know, I would probably just go Lethal Tempo, Triumph, Alacrity, Coup de Grace, Absolute, Gathering, and then Hurricane, Infinity Edge, Static Shiv is the greedy build. Phantom Dancer is the slightly safer build, but that's how I would run it if you can get through the laning phase. Particularly if you have something like a Sona or a Soraka or a Nami or some other healer in your lane, you may not need the lifesteal early on, which would allow you to go for this greedier build with Infinity plus Hurricane. You can also take a Doran Shield or something like that early on if you need to. You could also take this over and go into Overheal plus Bloodline especially if you have the healing support, and that'll give you even more of a cushion in the laning phase. But I think Twitch is going to be amazing. You know, you could argue for Twitch being, you know, top 3 as well, just depending on how good you are with Twitch. The reason that I have him a bit lower is that he can get bullied out hard by Lucian, by Draven, by Cassiopeia early on in the game. But he does come online, and he can get back into the game really well with his invisibility, his hyperscaling. He gets the extra speed off of his Q. He gets the extra AD off of his ult. It has insane interactions with his ult, with Hurricane, with Critical Strike, with Blade of the Ruined King if you want to do that. He just has insane synergy with so many items in the game. And the invisibility just lets you get back in even if you fall behind early, because there's always going to be someone at a position that doesn't respect that invisibility, and you can just sneak up and farm them. You know, in solo queue all the time. So Twitch, don't underestimate him. Very, very strong champion. Just, you know, be a little careful with him, picking him into something like Draven Leona. You know, he can have a really hard laning phase. But once he comes online, he's online. Okay, last few champs. We're already at 50 minutes, so I'm just going to have to crank through this super fast. So I've got about 4 minutes, and then I, like, absolutely, you know, got to get out of here. But so, I talked a lot about the top 5, but I'll just mention the other ones really quickly. So, Vayne, I think, is still going to be on the strong side. The problem is she's still going to be weaker in the early game. She doesn't gain anything off of these crit changes. You don't want to build crit on Vayne because her Q, the bonus damage, can't crit anymore. If you think about the Vayne of old who used to crit and do a lot of damage on her tumble, that doesn't happen. They changed that. They nerfed that. It was either last year or the year before. So anyone that's talking about crit Vayne, they're living in the past. They nerfed it. It doesn't work anymore, okay? So you need to be going Blade of the Ruined King plus Ginsu's Rageblade. That's the new hotness. I would say you could comfortably pick her against tanks a lot of times. So if you have a, kind of a passive tank in the lane, that would be good. Like maybe an Alistar. Alistar's not super passive, but like Braum, Tom, Alistar. If they're going to let you just farm up, if it's like Janna Ezreal, she's very, very good into Ezreal because Ezreal doesn't pressure her much early in the game, and she has the tools to hunt him down and kill him later, so he can't get away from her usually if she just Q tumbles and dodges his Q so that he can't apply Iceborne Gauntlet, or if the Ezreal gets greedy and goes Trinity Force instead, she can hunt him down and kill him later. So she's a great counter to Ezreal. Ezreal is very popular these days. And she just has a really good single item power spike and double item power spike, right? Just because of how Blade of the Ruined King and Ginsu's interacts. If you didn't know this, the Ginsu's can proc her Silver Bolts faster, so it's every second shot instead of every third shot is going to trigger the Silver Bolts, and it triggers double damage off of Blade of the Ruined King and triggers double lifesteal off of Blade of the Ruined King. So you can go that build, and you can go for something like Overheal early on, and that'll help you out. There have been people that have been trying the Lethal Tempo is kind of the standard on her most of the time. Some people go Press the Attack. I don't think that's that great because Press the Attack doesn't modify the true damage off of your W, so you're losing a lot of value there with this build. But I do like either Fleet Footwork if it's a tough lane, or you can go Lethal Tempo if you're pretty sure that you're going to get through the laning phase and just smash them later on. There have been people that have been doing the Halo Blades build where you go, you can go like Bloodthirster, Ravenous Hunter, Eyeball Collection, and Hail of Blades. That gives you a very good first 3 hits. That's great for trading in lane. Her Q does reset your auto attack timer, so if you time it right, if you auto attack Q, auto, then you get that extra attack speed for 4 attacks instead of just 3 if you weave in a Q in there. And that does give you a lot of sustain, especially if you pair that with something like Bloodline plus Overheal in your secondary tree. She doesn't get a lot of value off of coup de grace because she doesn't burst people out. It's nice. If you go into the precision tree, you definitely want to get coup de grace, but if you go into domination instead, you're not losing out on that much by not having coup de grace. You're still going to be able to get your Overheal. You're still going to be able to get Bloodline if you want that, or Alacrity. You're just trading out your Lethal Tempo for your sustained high damage later on for like better trades early on with Halo Blades and better burst. But I still think Lethal Tempo is a lot better, and just to play to your strengths later on, which is your attack speed. And your Silver Bolts with Blade of the Ruined King and Ginsu. So I would probably go Lethal, but there are some people trying Hail Blades. It just depends. Hail gives you better early game. Lethal gives you better late game. And the Hail build will give you more lifesteal, so it does allow you to have more sustainability in the lane because you can get both. You can get Overheal plus Bloodline plus Taste of Blood plus Ravenous Hunter. So you can have 4 different heals, and you can even take Doran Shield on top of that. So you can have 5 sustain. So that can be very good against poke lanes if you're against something like a Sona or a Nami or a Karma or something like that, and you just want to sustain through and just make sure you're not down 30 CS in the laning phase. That can be a decent option, especially if you don't have a healer or support. If you got a Sona, you don't have to do that. But, you know, if you've got a Lulu or something like that, you're going to need that extra heal. Okay, Xayah. Still going to be pretty strong. Kind of a weird build. I recommend going Infinity Edge on her, and the reason is you need to get your Q Evolve early. And they've changed around. I've seen some people toying around with Essence Reaver. Essence Reaver only gives you 60 AD, so you're not going to get your Evolve off of your first item. Infinity Edge will give you the Evolve off of your first item. It seems a little weird to get that on her, but I think that going Infinity Edge plus Hurricane would be really good, and just forget about Gensu's. I know that's blasphemy on Xayah, but honestly, is it? If you think about it, you have to charge up Gensu's on a minion wave. Realistically, just ask yourself, if you play Xayah, do you do that before most team fights? Do you charge up your Gensu's, or do you just walk in with 0 stacks and try to do something in a team fight? If you walk in with 0 stacks, you're losing a ton of value on that item. So I think it's just a lot more user-friendly for a lot of people just to go a crit build now. Just so you get that Q Evolve early, you complete your Hurricane. That's going to give you your E Evolve. You're going to have 50% crit. Your Hurricane bolts do apply your passive, so you're still applying your passive to a lot of different people in a team fight, which is really good. And then you can get something like a Phantom Dancer as your next item, or you could even get Static Shiv if you want to double down on the AoE of your Q plus your Hurricane plus your Static Shiv. I think that's a legit build. You still might see people getting things like Gensu, like, I don't know what your starting item would be. I think Gensu's to start is still terrible most of the time. You could do something like Gensu's into Hurricane, I guess, but that's kind of like non-synergy. Like, each Hurricane bolt doesn't apply. It doesn't stack extra Gensu's faster, and it doesn't apply the Phantom hit off of Gensu's. So you're not getting any real value out of Hurricane and having Gensu's in the same build. I don't know. Like, the value that you're getting is you're spreading it amongst a lot of different people with Hurricane, and you're spreading it faster to a single target with Gensu's, but it just doesn't interact the way that people might initially suspect. So I think that's kind of a non-combo, a nombo there. So I think just quit playing around. Just go BF Sword into Hurricane into Infinity Edge, and then get another crit item after that, either Phantom Dancer or Static Shiv, not Rapid Fire Cannon. But I think that's probably going to be the build to go. You can still throw in some AP items if you want, but I just think the crit scaling and just get them dead is probably the way to go. You know, Xayah does have nice AP ratios. Her passive does do a lot of damage. It does do a lot of on-hit, so, you know, you might still see people doing that. But, you know, my concern is you're not going to have your Q Evolve. I guess you could go something like Nashor's Tooth into Gensu's, into, like, Hurricane or something, and then you would get, like, all 3 Evolves, but... or actually, no, you'd have to get an AD item in there somewhere, and the best AD item is going to be Infinity Edge. I guess you could go Death's Dance. Maybe you could go Death's Dance into Gensu's into Hurricane or something like that. So you could either go Death's Dance or Infinity Edge. So if you want to go Gensu's early, I would say go Death's Dance, because that'll give you your 80 AD. And then you'll complete it off of just that one item. You'll get your Q done, and then you can go to Gensu's if you want to. If you don't want to go for the crit build, so you would just go like maybe Death's Dance into Hurricane, or Death's Dance into Gensu's into maybe Blather and King. That would give you double lifesteal. If you want to go for like an overheal build, that'd give you double lifesteal, a lot of mitigation off of the Death's Dance, and it would allow you to stack up your Gensu's more in team fights before you die, and it would give you a ton of single target burst damage, particularly against tanks. So maybe that's a build. Maybe like Death's Dance into Gensu's into Blather and King. Maybe that could be a build, but I think that's getting a little funky. I would just go BF Sword, Hurricane, Infinity Edge, other crit item. That's how I would build her most of the time. Okay, Ezreal, same deal. There's no need to really talk about Ezreal. Super powerful. If you're good on Ezreal, he's great. If you're bad on Ezreal, he's terrible. There's not much middle ground. He takes a long time to get off the ground. You really need to hit a lot of Qs in the laning phase so that you get those sacks of gold so you can power up faster. But yeah, he's just a total pest. He's almost impossible to get a hold of. He does a ton of damage later on in the game. I expect he'll get nerfed in a patch or two, but he's terrible in the early game. So you have to really trust that your team is not going to completely collapse while you're powering up. You can 1v9, but you're not going to be able to do that until like 25 or 30 minutes into the game, whereas Lucian and Draven can do that from level 1. And so you're really putting a lot on the line because his best build is a double tier build, and that takes a long time to stack. So yeah, you just gotta trust that your team's not gonna completely collapse, and you have to dodge everything. If you're dying as Ezreal, don't play him, right? If you're gonna play something that's gonna die, play Jinx or play Draven because they're gonna have a lot higher ceiling as far as their raw power. Okay, but Ezreal, you're paying a huge premium for safety, right? You're taking away a ton of your damage throughout most of the game in exchange for like never dying. Okay. And then Sivir can be a little bit stronger. People are going to try her out. She can go, I think a build might be like Infinity Edge, Static Shiv, maybe Essence Reaver. I guess you could go Essence Reaver first, like maybe like an Essence Reaver plus Static Shiv build and just go like the AFK split push build and then get your Infinity Edge third item. There will be some options on her, but I think she's going to have a lot less power in the early game than some of these other champions. And I think that even these other champions can keep up in wave clear because a lot of them are Hurricane users. And if they get BF Sword into Hurricane first, they'll be able to match you in terms of wave clear early on. So Lucian's got a lot of wave clear. Jinx with Hurricane and Rockets has a lot of wave clear. Cassiopeia has wave clear. Twitch with Hurricane and his Poison has a lot of wave clear. So Kai'Sa's got decent wave clear with her Q. So I just don't think you're going to get a lot of advantage by wave clearing early. And once again, you're kind of trusting your team not to collapse early on because you're going to have very low kill threat and sort of power in the early game. Sivir really comes online once she gets like 3 crit items later on, and her W is critting off a bunch of people in team fights. But you know who else is really strong later on off of crits in team fights and AoE damage? Jinx, Twitch. And all of these games, or all of these champions, are going to be a bit more powerful in the early game than Sivir. So Sivir's okay. You'll see her in pro play probably a little bit. She does have a lot of utility with her ult. The wave clear is very strong, especially for split pushing with certain types of compositions and strategies in pro play. But solo queue, it's going to be rough. And then the last little bit here, Jhin, I think it's going to power down a little bit because of the loss of Stormrazor. Still very good. Probably go Infinity Edge plus Rapid Fire. Can still put out a lot of pressure in the early game. Tristana can still be strong. She does have low range early. She takes a little bit to power up. She's going to be somebody who's probably going to go Static Shiv, BF Sword, Static Shiv, Infinity Edge, and then either Rapid Fire or Phantom Dancer, depending on what you need. So she's not a Hurricane abuser. So I think that she's going to fall a lot in priority. She doesn't have a lot of bully potential early on either, like Lucian or Draven, who also don't use Hurricane but can blast people early. However, she gets ahead. She can snowball really hard. She's got those jumps for reset. She takes towers quickly. She's relatively safe, not only with her escape, but her ability to basically be unCCable whenever she starts her jump. So she is a menace. She can be pretty good. She does scale really hard. She just takes a bit longer to come online than some of the other champions, and she doesn't have a great early game. So she's okay. Very snowbally. Has a decent chunky utility to her. Caitlyn, a lot of people will be trying out Caitlyn. I'm just not a huge believer. I think a lot of people are bad. On Caitlyn, you have to have really good trap placement. You have to be very safe. You have to auto attack a ton during the laning phase while you're hitting all of your CS. Like you have to have very, very good mechanics on Caitlyn, I think, to make her work. The reason that she doesn't scale as well as other champions is her base attack speed is insanely low. It's like 0.56. It's like 20% lower than a lot of, maybe not 20%, but maybe it might be like 20% lower than most other champions. A lot of people are like 66% base attack speed, sometimes even higher. So that means that she doesn't scale as well with attack speed items, with Zeal items. So she doesn't scale as well with something like Rapid Fire Cannon or Static Shiv with the attack speed portion of it, or with Lethal Tempo as someone like Jinx, for example, who has a much higher attack speed. That's a deliberate nerf they did to Caitlyn a long time ago that a lot of people don't understand. If you've never played her, she attacks like ultra slow. So that really hurts her scaling. So if you can bully out early, if you can get an advantage, then she can be good. I just think that someone like Lucian or Draven are just going to be much better at kind of that early bully type of role than she is. But if you really like her, if you can get a lot of pressure, if you're taking towers quickly, you can make her work. But I don't think she's for everybody. If you do play her, she's going to be an Infinity Edge, Rapid Fire Cannon, Static Shiv user in that order. BF Sword into Rapid Fire Cannon, into Infinity Edge. She might rush, she'll probably rush Infinity Edge flat up, or straight up probably, because Rapid Fire is terrible to complete early. So probably like Infinity Edge, then Rapid Fire, then Static Shiv. Okay. Xayah is still going to be pretty weak. Some people try Essence Reaver on her. I don't think it's going to be that great. I think her best build is going to end up being BF Sword into Static Shiv, into Infinity Edge, and then get Rapid Fire after that. Or you could go Essence Reaver after that, so maybe BF Sword into Static, into Infinity Edge, into Essence Reaver, because she has so much ability power off of her E, and you want to make sure that you're doing that damage. So I think that she'll still be pretty strong. Varus, I just needed to put somebody there. I think he's pretty bad. You shouldn't play him. He doesn't use crit very well. His on-hit build got nerfed a long time ago. He does have utility off of his ult. He can scale if left alone, but he's probably not going to be that great. Honorable mentions, these can be okay, but the ones above them will be the champions that you want to prioritize. Okay, that's going to be it. Thank you very much. Have a good day. Hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to like and subscribe if you did, and I'll see you next time.